Welcome to the Fertility Mind podcast. I am your host, Jessica Friesen, a certified fertility mindset coach, a sound healer, and an international best-selling author. My mission for this podcast is to give you weekly episodes where you hear my own success with IVF and how mindset and manifestation changed it all for me. You will also hear from my guests who share their success stories in the fertility world. I want you to know that you are not alone. Even when things feel tough and when things feel like they aren't going your way, the tools and techniques you will get in this podcast, I know can change everything for you too. So thanks for being here with me today, and let's dive in. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Fertility Mind. I've got a special guest here today, one of my dear friends, Jocelyn Hinz, and we met a while ago. She was holding a yoga retreat, and I absolutely fell in love with her. And then we actually connected because we started talking about being in the fertility world and IVF and things like that. So before I do anything else, Jocelyn, take it over.
Thanks so much, Jess, for having me on. I really appreciate you holding space and opening up a container to chat about fertility, because when you're in it, it feels like you're alone, and you absolutely are not. Sadly, there's a lot of us. And I feel like it's really important to just have this ongoing conversation about yes, this can work for you, and no, you are not broken. It doesn't have to feel like that. I was actually looking back in my calendar, and because I was, putting some dates and times together, and I had our very first coffee date in our calendar, and I looked that up. So that was November of 2019. Wow. So a while ago. For the record, it's now February 2023. Yeah. So did you want me to just start from the very beginning and we can just go from there?
Yeah. So I think just talk kind of how you found yourself in the fertility world. Did you guys have to try naturally for so many years before you were considered for fertility, or did you guys get to go straight in, just basically whatever you feel comfortable sharing, how you ended up finding yourself in the fertility world?
Sure. Okay. So it was 2018 when I started just randomly bleeding. If I would go for a run, I would be bleeding. If I would work out, go to yoga, practice barre, anything, or even just in between cycles, I would be spotting. So I started, and this didn't just happen once, it happened a lot. So I was starting to get a little bit concerned about it. So I went to my family doctor, and he, of course, was Jocelyn, women hold fat differently in their body, which is true. And maybe it's just that. And I was like, I thank you for that. And no, it's not actually that. So I asked him to refer me to an OB. And from there, our story kind of just started to slowly pick up speed and snowball forward. So I went through a lot of blood work, labs, and I had an HSG through my OB, which is where they send basically dye into your uterus and fallopian tubes to see if your fallopian tubes are blocked, because that was a concern with the bleeding as well. And it turned out that one of my tubes was partially blocked, but it's all kind of inconclusive. It's not a test that you can look back on and be like, this is for sure that. It just, that day, that time, it happened to show a partial blockage. So my OB wasn't super happy with that. And honestly, with our time together, which was a few months back in 2018, overlapping 2019, she was my last appointment with her, she's like, Jocelyn, I just like don't know what's wrong with you. And I was like, okay, thank you for that again. Can you send me to the next thing? So we moved on to our first fertility clinic, and I just remember walking into that fertility clinic, and you know when you go into like an Ontario or like a government or medical office or whatever, and you pull one of those numbers, and they like call you so go sit down, and then they call your number up, and it's just very like, you know, who even are you in this moment.
Yeah.
So I remember walking out of that first fertility clinic after our first appointment, just being like, what even just happened in there? Like, I do not have a good feeling. And just knowing who I am as a person and as a woman, like I go off, make a lot of decisions on just like how I feel in the moment. So after walking out of there, I was like, you know, this can't be it. There has to be something else. So then we met for coffee, and you told me the clinic that you were at, and I was like, whoa, you know, it automatically, because I knew that you were there and you were having a good experience, feeling taken care of, I reached out to them. And of course, like I was trying to remember if I referred myself, but I think that I had to then call the family doctor again to get referred to that clinic. And you know, when you're in the system, there's just like a lot of, well, check this box, and then you can move to the next thing, and then you have to check that box, and you can move to the next thing. So once we got into our that like current fertility clinic, everything just seemed to move at like warp speed. So this would be like February 2020 that I was at this that I then walked into the fertility clinic that we now share. And I remember walking out of that first appointment, and I was like, holy wow, like this is how you are supposed to be treated as a patient in the fertility world. I was just blown away. I think we actually share that same fertility specialist, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And he is just out of this world. Like I was blown away by his like demeanor and his just mannerisms, and basically his like no BS attitude. Like I also remember just that first appointment. He's like, he looked at my chart and all the things, and he's like, do you know what? Like, we just need to start over. Like, we need to figure out what's actually going on, because none of this shows anything. And then it was March 2020, April 2020, and we all know what happened there. Just a mess of things.
Yeah.
And my dad died within that time frame. So my dad passed away from cancer, April of 2020, and my whole life just fell apart. I also was, teaching yoga, hosting retreats, and all like I could, like the world shut down. Like I couldn't work. I didn't have a job. My dad died. We were going through like fertility stuff again. Like it was a lot. I moved through heavy grief. And looking back now, I mean, when you're in it, of course, as you know, it's like, wow, what is wrong with my life? Like I, was heading in the right direction. And then looking back now, I was like, oh, that actually did have to happen for me to, move forward. Just let me know if I'm talking too much, or if you have questions or whatever.
Your story, I think it's so important for everyone to hear the part of the story, because, I share mindset throughout my podcast and how it really changes things. And you nailed it when you said, like, when you're going through it, like, you really are like, what the hell's wrong with me? Why is this happening? This is not fair. Oh my gosh. But then when you kind of look back, you're like, okay, it's hard to say for people that are really smack dab in the middle of their fertility treatments. They can't look back yet. So they're in the trenches. And that's the reason I want to share these hope stories, because I want people to know that, it doesn't, I'm not promising you it's going to be an easy journey, but I'm promising you that, if you stick through and you follow your gut and you listen to you're going to be in a far better position. And there is far more hope than there is, just being in this place when everything's heavy and everything's hard. So yeah, keep telling your story. It's a beautiful story. And I love how you advocate for yourself. And I think that's a huge, important message for my listeners to hear, because they need to know it's okay to advocate for yourself. It's okay to talk about, this isn't feeling right. It's okay to say, maybe this is not the right clinic for me. Because I personally know a lot of women who, including myself, that like I plowed through a lot of things just to get there. And, when it's not working and you look back and you think, why did I stay? Like I had options, but I didn't know it. And I learned so much more on my secondary fertility journey than I knew in my first, because I didn't know anyone. And I didn't feel like when I reached out to connect with other people in 2014, no one was talking about it. Or they started talking about it once, you had a miscarriage. You're like, oh yeah, I'm like 1 in 4. I'm 1 in 8. You're like, oh my gosh, where were you when I started this? Not that we ever wanted to be part of this club. But you don't, it's not a settling feeling like you're not alone, because you're like, oh my gosh, someone else is going through this. But you also feel like, okay, it's not just me. Yeah. So continue on with your story.
Yeah. And I think in saying that too, it's important to remember that you are your best authority. So yes, you are going to specialists, you are seeking help, and you are, asking for someone to step in to help you. But at the end of the day, it's you, you are your best authority. So that's why I just feel so strongly about, like, if you don't get a good feeling about that, then that is you being like, no, put the brakes on for a second, or let's look at other options. So that actually is what happened again moving forward. So in June of 2020, because our fertility doctor wanted to just like go through the whole thing again, I had a sonohysterogram and a hysteroscopy within the same week. And basically, they are both procedures. I was awake through both of them, but they see inside of your uterus. So I remember, like, Dev, my husband, couldn't come in with me to anything because we were in, the pandemic. And I remember just being like, I had to take a Valium before I even got there because
sorry, I'm trying to tickle in my throat. This is horrible for
That's okay. Oh my God. That's what I was doing on Valium. So I had to take a Valium like before going into the sonohysterogram. And I was just like, I was so high. Like I was just like, I didn't know what like level of the fertility clinic I was on. Like, we can pause. Do you need water? Yeah.
I'm just going to pause for 1 second.
Yes. Okay. So because Dev couldn't go into any of the appointments with me, he basically like gave me a Valium and sent me on my way. And I just remember walking into the sonohysterogram, like needing to pull out my health card and like the paperwork. And I just was like, I should not be, in here by myself. I am not of sound mind. So that was basically to rule out that I didn't have anything, crazy going on with my uterus. Like there were no polyps or, like my uterus was in good shape. There were no indents or caves or whatever. So everything checked out there. So everything basically was like, yeah, you're fine. The hysteroscopy, they give you, if anyone has had one, then you know how terrible it is. But it's basically you are put into like a state of shedding everything inside of you. So it was like having is basically having an abortion with no baby. And I just remember, like, I didn't sleep at all that night. I was in so much pain. It was incredibly painful. I would never wish it on anyone, but it ruled out again that everything was fine. So I just remember going through this week and being like, holy, again, like I realize that everything is moving us in the right direction and moving forward, but it just seems like I am being tested a lot. So I started to, like, I bought a couple of onesies, little baby onesies, and I set them beside our bed. And I looked at them, I held them and I looked at them and I started just like speaking out loud to our baby. And I was like, we are getting so close to you. Like, I can't wait to see you in this little onesie. And I would like sleep with it. Like, I just needed to know that. And I needed to remind myself that everything that feels so difficult right now is moving us so much closer towards our littlest one. And there's so much hope in that. So again, in advocating for yourself, in August of 2020, I was told that I needed a booster to the regular vaccine schedule that we have here in Ontario. And for the record, I'm like 30, you know. I was like, I don't know if this doesn't feel right. I don't feel like I actually do need this booster. So again, I had to go to my family doctor and be like, can you write me a letter and offer me a blood test so I can prove that I have antibodies towards this disease or whatever. And I did have antibodies, everything checked out. So I was like, imagine like all these people just like lining up. Like I felt like my body was like a vessel that I needed to protect because so many hands were in there and so much was going on. And I knew that we were heading towards just like a journey and in a journey of like unimaginable like hormone fluctuations and all the things. And I was like, if I don't need one more thing, I'm not going to take that one more thing. And that was really important to me, holding that ground. So September of 2020, we made up a plan and I got sent into menopause through Lupron Depot. So I know the judge and the jury aren't completely out on Lupron, but I also didn't want to wait a year to find out if I actually had endometriosis. Because at that point, the wait list for the surgery to find out if I had that was like over a year long. And I was like, do you know what, no, I don't think I want to wait a year. So we'll just go ahead. So I did 3 months, one shot a month that I had to drive an hour for, drive an hour home for. I couldn't do them myself. The nurse there had to do them. So 3 shots of Lupron, 3 months of menopause. And I was without a cycle. This is where I feel like things get serendipitous, is I was without a cycle for 108 days. So my menopausal journey in my 30s was 108 days. And if you're, in the yoga world or familiar with numbers, like 108 is just this like magical number of like things coming together. And from there, I was like, okay, I feel like things are speeding up a bit. I had induced menopause for me was just like the most terrible thing ever. I didn't sleep for months. I, gained weight. I was so hungry. I had night sweats, day sweats. I lost muscle tone. Like your body is like, every day I'm like, thank you, body. Like, thank you for just showing up for me and doing the things because I put you through so much and you are so strong and I love you, So after menopause ended, they basically were like, okay, now the funding has run out. And I was like, oh, all right, this is unexpected because in Ontario, your first round of IVF is covered minus medication. So this would take the menopausal journey took us to the end of 2020. So now we were waiting on new funding to arrive in 2021. And I just was like, okay, now again, I have to wait. There's like so much waiting. So I put a note in my calendar. We were heading to a cottage in the winter in April with my husband's family. We try and go once a year, just as a big family to go. And I was like, do you know what? In March, at the end of March, I'm going to email cycle monitoring. I'm going to email our fertility clinic and just check in and see, what the funding situation is like and where I am on the list and what I can expect moving forward. And she got back to me and she's like, do you know what, Jocelyn? We have the funding now because it was the end of March. And she's like, call us back on the first day of your cycle. And that was the first day of my cycle that I emailed her. So at the end of March of 2021, 3 months after being in menopause, I now was starting fertility, like IVF things. So if I wouldn't have emailed or talked to or reached out, I would have been, who knows where I would have been. I maybe would have been like, I don't know how it works. Like if you're on a numbered list or if it goes in priority, like I only had a 6-month window then to after menopause, after being on Lupron to get into IVF. So I know it would have been like April, May, June, but if I didn't email end of March, I would have been, later. So I had to drive to the fertility clinic that day, the day that we were going on vacation, to get a blood panel done. And she emailed my birth control prescription to the place that we were going, the pharmacy there's one pharmacy in this little small, cottage town. And she had to email the prescription of the birth control to that pharmacy because we were going there for the weekend. And she's like, you need to start that now. And I remember on our drive up, it was like 4 hours or something. And I was like calling pharmacies because she gave us a med list. I was calling pharmacies. I was calling our insurance company. I was like, okay, we're in it. This is happening. So I am so happy that I reached out. And the timing, was just, it all worked out at that moment. So then I did 30 days of birth control. And then from there, we basically got into injections. So what I found out through looking and calling pharmacies for prices for meds, because we also don't have insurance for medication, was that there was a difference. So a fertility clinic, they had, possibly a contract or like good standing with one pharmacy, and they sent me there right away. And I just wanted to check around. So I actually got a better price for medication at a different pharmacy, one that they didn't recommend. Because what we forget here in the land of, free healthcare, air quotes, is that these pharmacies, doctor's offices, dentists, vets, like these are all businesses and they run themselves as a business. Therefore, there is wiggle room for price fluctuations. So we have to remember that we get to look around, we get to price check things, we get to go and find the best prices for what we need. And that was a big lesson for me because we actually saved like quite a substantial amount. I just wanted to pause there so that everyone can write down to price check your meds.
I think that's incredible because
yeah.
Without repeating myself, I literally went to that same pharmacy they sent you. And because back then, when I first started this, like we didn't have, I did have benefits, but it did not cover a single one of my fertility treatments.
Yeah.
So, and the first thing that they had said to me at that pharmacy is, if you don't have health benefits, we can absolutely give you a discount. And I just felt so grateful because they said the word discount, because I didn't have my benefits didn't cover any of those. And so I did not look around. It wasn't even a thought in my head to look around. It was just, okay, you said discount. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And then on we went. So I think it's amazing that you are like saying, like, do your price shopping. It is so worth it, because especially when you are paying out of pocket, if you can save $100 or $1,000 or a couple $1,000s, that is so worth it, because you never know if it's going to work on your first transfer or your second transfer. And either way, it's nice to know that you're not just spending your money when you could spend it somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember picking up, after I decided on the pharmacy that we were going to work with, I just remember picking up our meds, and he like took me into this little back room and sat down with me, and he like showed me the things, because I got handed basically a box of needles and vials and meds, and he went through everything with me, and I was so grateful for that. Because you do go into this like not having a clue. So we need to keep surrounding ourselves with people that, can take care of us a little bit as we stand firm moving forward too, if that makes sense. So after my 30 days of birth control, then I started stims. So stims for IVF is just, days of basically stimulating your body, hoping for your follicles to produce eggs. So normally on one cycle, you have one egg that releases, and if it doesn't get fertilized, then you have your period. When you stim your body, you are basically like jacking up as many follicles and hoping for as many eggs as possible. So I had 15 at the end of my 12 days of stims. I had 15 follicles, and on my retrieval day, only 13 eggs were retrieved. So not every follicle has an egg in it, which I also feel like is important, because I didn't know that. So I went into retrieval being like, holy moly, 15 eggs, here we go. But that was not the case. So it was so funny. I feel like at every moment of our journey, there's like one little hiccup at like every little thing. So on the day of retrieval, we had no cell phones. Our phone network went down. So Dev and I are on the same phone network, and I just happened to like write down screenshot the directions to the fertility clinic, because it wasn't the normal one we go to. We had to go to Toronto for that one, for the retrieval. So we had no cell phones. We had like screenshot directions, and like we were just hoping for the best. We left so early. We're like, we don't know where we're gonna end up. We hope we end up in the right place, but I was like, of all days, this happens. One more little thing. So after retrieval, I had 13 eggs retrieved. 8 eggs were mature, and only 3 eggs fertilized. So 2 embryos made it to day 5. So I know you're familiar with that like week, Jess, too, is like you're just waiting by the phone being like, send me updates. Like, I just need to know how my eggs are doing, how my embryos are doing. So I remember our fertility doctor, he called and he's like, hey, Jocelyn, I'm just going to give it to you straight. You have 2 embryos left. And I was like, okay, is this like, again, I had no idea. I'm like, is this good? Is this bad? Is it like, I was hoping for more, but 2 is also, that's like potentially 2 little babies. Like that's a perfect, a family. And he's like, because you're young, like in your early 30s, and because your body responded well to the stims and the meds, like we have a lot of hope that like we should do a fresh transfer. So I agreed with him after doing a little bit of reading, and we ended up doing a fresh 5-day transfer. So 1 embryo went to the freezer and 1 embryo went into me. And after that, we then had our betas, of course, and blood work and everything checked out. But it happened to be that fresh 5-day transfer was almost exactly a year to the date that my dad passed. which was like, again, a little serendipitous. Like it makes me feel comforted that people are looking out for me.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what you believe or where, your heart is with the people that are no longer here that you love, like they are all around you, and looking for little signs and feeling connected to them in certain ways is really important for you, like your heart and your mental health. So I wasn't surprised that, that date came up. But our first beta was 400, which was good. And then our second beta a few days later was 1500. So I was definitely pregnant. It was more than doubled. And then to round all of that out, I was just on progesterone for like 60 days, progesterone suppositories. And then basically, if everything is still checking out after those few ultrasounds, then they release you. You do your antenatal blood work, and then you can choose, who to go through and for your prenatal care. And we chose a midwifery service. Again, a little piece of advocating is like the midwifery service that we chose was full when I reached out, and I just kept emailing, not in a like rude way or, it's just check in like, hey, I'm still really interested. Like, please let me know. Hey, I'm just checking in, like where I am on the wait list. Like if you have something, a care team in mind, like you basically have to stop at nothing because it's so easy to get lost. Did you feel the same way?
Yes. So,
Yeah.
because when I was pregnant with my twins, I was told I automatically had to go to an OB.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to get into the OB that I wanted to. I was so excited. Like that was the one thing I did my research on. Because I've heard some beautiful stories about OBs and I've heard some not so beautiful stories. And I thought there was a few that I just thought like, oh gosh, please. So I had actually called there. I think there was like 3 or 4, and I called all 3, and all 3 of them said that they were full. And so I called and I knew I wanted to have a midwife. But with twins, they tell you, if it's an IVF pregnancy and it's twins, there's a lesser of a chance of getting a midwife without the OB, because there's certain OB appointments you have to go to. And not, at least in Canada, not all OBs and midwives will work together. It's either one service or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, when the midwives actually said, you know what, if we can get you into an OB, we can possibly take you on. So they actually sent an email for me to the one OB that I really wanted. And she called me back. She's like, of course. And then
awesome.
So they actually I was able to have both, which I felt was so important for me, because I thought after I have my twins, I would like the aftercare of 6 weeks, not just here's your babies, go home.
Yes.
And the beautiful thing for me, because my twins were born 8 weeks early, so I wasn't able to have my OB or my midwives at my birth. I was in the hospital in London, in the NICU. And so they were able, and my twins were actually in the hospital for 6 weeks. So technically that time frame, I'm out of everyone's care. And my midwives actually said, we will extend it for 3 weeks. So you're home for 3 weeks and we'll check in on you. And I remember feeling like, thank you. This is the best service I could have ever asked for, because I know as soon as I came home from the hospital, there was an intense amount of fear that I felt, because my son, my daughter was actually released 10 days before my son, and my son was still hooked up to machines. And both of them could breathe on their own, but my son had bradycardias, meaning his heart rate and his oxygen would just drop. And like, he did it a lot when he was sleeping. So it's almost he forgot to breathe.
Oh,
he
so
was
scary.
Just so healthy. I like to tell myself. So like when we got home, I was like, such like in paranoid. I'm like, I knew we were safe in a hospital because if anything were happening, like we're there. And then as soon as we were home, I'm like, what if any of this happens? I'm by myself and I've got another one. And like, oh, it was crazy.
Yeah.
But I kept telling myself we're fine. They released us because they knew we were fine. But it was really nice to have that that midwifery care for the next 3 weeks that I could call or I could text and say like, is this okay? So I really appreciated that service. And that was the one thing I was like, yes, I would really like to not just be sent home after this crazy experience in a hospital for so long. So it was nice.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I was the exact same way. Excuse me. I also just know myself, and I also needed that care. First time mom, like what, you just like get sent home with this tiny baby and you're like, okay. It was also the middle of January for us, so freezing cold. Like I just couldn't imagine needing to take him out and go places like to get checked up on, and it just seems so stressful. I just wanted people to come to me. Oh gosh, yeah. So just nothing about our getting pregnant journey, being pregnant and having our son Grady was easy. I was in labor. I was a week late, which is normal. And then I was in labor for almost 50 hours. So my water broke, like 3 days prior to him being born. And that I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't sure. I thought, you like take your prenatal class, you're like, okay, you like go into labor, things start happening, your water breaks, and then things speed up. But like my water broke right away, and then things slowed down. And then so I had originally planned for a home birth. Because again, we were kind of just on that tail end of that like weird pandemic thing. So I was like, I don't even want to be in the hospital. I don't want anything to do with that. And my entire pregnancy, I was like, I had so many hands on me and in me to get pregnant. I'm like, I don't want any hands on me. I don't want any hands in me. I just want to like trust myself. And I know that my body, like women have been doing this for millennia. Like I know that it knows what to do. So that's why that's why I chose a home birth. Because I just wanted to like settle into our home. And then my water broke, and then I was in labor for like 2.5 days, and I was like, okay, things I was getting so tired because I had contractions right away. We were up for like 2 days, and then finally Deb's like, okay, we need to make a decision. And our midwife was like, I will support you either way. She wasn't pushing for the hospital, she wasn't pushing to stay home. She was like, you're in good shape, everything is fine. But I was just so tired. I'm like, I think I need help here. So then I cried and cried and cried and cried about making that decision, because I'm like, if everything that I had planned is just going down the drain, again, is like, it's so funny making plans. You're like, why do I even do this? So we went to the hospital. I had Grady 12 hours later, and we were home within like 4 hours of him being born. And I was hooked up to all the things. I had all the belly monitors, and I was being induced. And it just was, they had this like massive, mirror on wheels. And I was like, bring that over. Like, I want to see him coming out. Like, I want to like be as present as possible. I pushed for an hour, and there were times in there that I was like, I need to call it. I am physically spent. I'm mentally spent. I just want to meet our little guy. Like, I was so close to being like, just cut me open, pull him out. Like, I don't care, but I'm so glad that I had Deb in my ear, and he was like, you can do this. You're so close. Like, he's right there. We're ready. We're ready for him. And I just feel so proud of myself for having the like mental stamina to keep going. I feel like a lot of it, and everyone is certainly different. I'm in no sense saying if you're like in an emergency situation to just like mentally get through it. No. But if you like, my body, everything was fine. And it was just my mind being like, this is hard. And I'm so happy and proud of myself to like to have talked myself through that. And I know that you advocate a lot for this, is like your mind, it can be your greatest strength or your biggest weapon. And if we just knew how much power we had over it and that it doesn't rule us, we get to communicate with it and like and have conversations and know that that little voice is not a real thing. It's like programming and history and all the things, you know. I feel like we would all be have a better perspective of ourselves. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'd like to say two things. So I think it's important that we talk about numbers with like egg retrievals and things like that. Because you're right, it really only does take one embryo. Because I think there's a lot, like I remember when I had my first embryo or my first egg retrieval, we had 39 retrieved. And
Wow.
it's actually scared me. And because I was like, I heard the lady like literally in the like dressing room, I guess, across from me, because it's literally a curtain in this like tiny
Yes.
little cubicle.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
she's like, I got 5 eggs retrieved. This is amazing. And I thought, what is wrong with me? And I remember them telling me, like, you are far way too, like, you're like hyper stimulated. And I was like, is that a bad thing? They're like, no, we can control it. We're fine. Um, and I had 10 embryos that made it to the freezer, but actually only 2 of my 10 embryos are my twins. The rest of them
Yes.
were failed transfers.
Right.
And so I think it's really important that because I remember you and I were like texting and you're like, I don't know if that's a good number. I'm like, stop focusing on the numbers.
Yes.
Don't
Yeah.
mean anything.
Yeah.
Because some fertility doctors really go into detail. Like you said, like some of them are just little sacs that have nothing in them. And, like not every one of them is matured. So,
Mm-hmm.
and the one interesting thing, so back in 2014, they didn't take all of my fertilized or not fertilized, all of my embryos, but they took 39 because those were the biggest size measuring wise. And that also helped me remain in a hyperstimulated state because I didn't take them all. So when I had
Right.
my second egg retrieval, again, I had a crazy high number, which I'm now learning through the thing that can be endometriosis. That can be so many underlying medical conditions. That doesn't mean I'm a superhero. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
anything like that at all. But my doctor at that point, he took all of them. He said because those empty sacs can start actually filling up with fluid, and that's when you start looking pregnant. So 2 days after my egg retrieval in 2014, I looked like, I guess it was 3 days. I was supposed to go in for my fresh transfer.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked like I was 6 months pregnant. And I was like, and they're like, you are still far too like hyperstimulated for any of this. And I was like, why? What's going on?
Yeah.
I later found out that my daughter, like when I asked when we were going in for our second egg retrieval, I'm like, I don't want to look 6 months pregnant. I don't like, just tell me. And he's like, did he retrieve every single egg? And I said, no. And he said, that's one of the biggest problems. He said, because those sacs will fill up with fluid because you were overstimulated. Your body was like holding these things and now it's gone. So it's like, okay, we got to fill back up.
Right.
So that was the best explanation. And he said, don't worry. He said, I take all the embryos. And I was like, okay, thank you. And I was borderline hyperstimulated that time as well. And again, I later found out that could have been underlying, that could have been endometriosis, PCOS, like lots of different things that they threw out afterwards. So I
Mm-hmm.
think, for any listener that's going through this that may be about to have an egg retrieval, never focus on the numbers, because I think honestly, we start to compare our journeys at that point. You start to think like, oh my gosh, like why did I have so much or why did I have so little? Or don't ever compare your journey. I think it's so important to know that every body is different, and your AMH, which is your egg count, can be different with every single woman based off of age, based off of just genetics, based off of everything.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing to talk about. And I love that you shared your birth story and how you just said like not every part of it was easy, because I think, and where you said like your mind said like it was hard. And I remember like that's the duality. You go into this with such hope, such excitement, and things seem like everything's lining up. But like I haven't shared my birth stories on here, which I think I will do an episode where I share them. Because my first birth story was a beautiful birth story. My second one, it was very traumatic.
Yeah.
And I just remember, but that's the thing. I stayed strong with my mind during my second labor because they kept telling me, no, you have to have a C-section. And I was like, I can't. And they're like, he's stuck. I'm like, I can't. Like, I can't. And my husband was literally a godsend. Like he was whispering in my ear. He's like, you know, the universal laws. He's like, you know, the universe is listening to you right now. Say, like, just stay strong with me. He's like, we're going to have Oren. We're going to have him. And I was like,
Yes.
okay. And literally there was like, it felt like 30 people in the room. We had the whole OR team. We had the anesthesiologist, everything coming in to tell me, like, I had them reading, like, this is what's going to happen with your C-section. And I was crying. And this is where I'm so thankful for my midwives. My one midwife that was with me, well, actually both of them that were with me, they said she does not want this and we're okay. And the OB was in there and I just looked at her and like tears streaming down my face. I said, please, please, please don't make me do this. And it was not that I was against a C-section at all. It's just I had twins to get to school. This was on a Friday evening and I had twins to
Oh.
get to school on Monday.
Oh
And
my gosh.
I didn't have anyone to take my kids to school, let alone their
Yeah.
first day of school. And I
Right.
also had 3 stepdaughters that had to get to school.
Yep.
Yes, I know their mom would have easily like organized the 3 girls to, you know, to get them off to school on their first day and everything like that. But I was like, I can't spend 6 weeks where I like, because my husband always took my 3 girls, like my older 3 girls to school, and I always took my twins to school. And I was like, I can't, when you have a C-section, you can't lift much more than your baby's weight, let alone
Yep.
try to get, you know, like 5-year-old, 5.5-year-old twins to school, backpacks, lunches,
Yes.
lifting a baby in the car seat and everything. I thought like I can't do this on my own. And I just knew that I couldn't have a C-section based off of my life because I did not have that help around me. And like my husband and I were just like so focused in our mind, and we did have a forceps delivery, but he was here. I did not have to.
Yeah.
And, you know, my husband kept saying, tell yourself it's not hard. We've got this. We've got this. And I kept saying, it's not hard. He's going to come out. He's going to come out. And he did. So I think that's amazing that you talked about the mindset, because we often become a diagnosis and we start to tell ourselves this is going to be hard because I have this underlying condition or I have this. And I just, you know, like even as soon as I heard like C-section, I was like, this is going to be hard. I can't do this. I can't do this. And I was, you know, and I was like, no, it's not going to be hard. I can do this. Bodies do these things all the time. I'm not the only one that's had a traumatic birth. I'm not the only one that's had this experience. And, you know, I think it's amazing that you've talked about the like the serendipity part of your journey, because I feel like a lot of things like that started lining up for me too. Once you really start to like, you make that decision. That is part of one of like the universal laws. You make your decision. And when you make your decision and you hold strong with your decision, things start to line up. And I know that sounds woo-woo for some people, but I think that's so true. And again, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Like you said, there's hiccups, but you stay focused and it really does happen. And, you know, like I think you had your son at the perfect time.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I just remember when you when you texted me, like, he's here. I'm like, yes, he's here.
I
Oh,
know.
it was so wonderful.
What a moment. What a moment for any mom, first time mom or not, to like finally have that like squishy baby in your arms after, like, I will remind you, my story started in 2018. Like this didn't just happen overnight, you know? And there was so much prep behind the scenes to even get to the IVF part. Like I didn't even talk about how I did like weekly acupuncture before and after retrieval, like monthly osteo visits, you know, taking care of my teeth, like the whole body is connected. I sought out like, touching on like woo stuff. Like I sought out like mediums, and like after dad died, I like went off on some like ragey spiritual journey moment, and it all had to, like, everything just had to come together at the right time. And I realized that everyone's story too is like so different, and we all have different history. Our bodies are all different. But I feel like a big problem that people and couples and women that get stuck in is that we just go ahead with our first option. We go ahead with that first fertility clinic where we feel like it's not right, or we go ahead with that first pharmacy where it's like, why am I paying so much? Or like, we don't see or acknowledge our own position within this fertility space. And like I mentioned at the beginning, like, we are best authority at the end of the day. Like, you knew that you wanted to have Oren without a C-section. And like, if your midwives didn't help you and assist you in that moment to speak up, or if your husband, was like, okay, let's go, it would have been totally different. Like, we need the people around us also to have our backs. And not just like, you should do this or you should do that. Like, I support you, but you need to decide, and I will stand with you. I feel like that's really important too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just one quick thing about my midwife also had to stand for me. Since we did end up at the hospital, I wanted a delayed cord clamping, but it just so happened that we were kind of at the end of our OB's work schedule. So she asked me twice, Grady, I just pushed Grady out of my body, and I had him on my I just had him on my chest, and she's like, do you consent to me cutting the cord? And I was like, absolutely not. Please do not touch the cord. And she's like, and then she listed the dangers of delayed cord clamping, and she's like, you consent to this? And I was like, yes, I do. And my midwife after, so she let us have like not a lot of time, but more than I would have gotten, right away. And my midwife came up to me, like, she was obviously still in the room, but she came up to me after, and she's like, I'm so proud of you for being in that especially vulnerable moment and still holding your ground and still trusting in what at that time. And if I didn't have that strong mindset, and if I didn't have that strong heart, if I didn't, feel very comfortable in my decision, that easily could have been swayed. Because you have everyone hanging out by your vagina, your legs are splayed open, like your squishy, bloody baby is on you. Like, it's just, you're so vulnerable, So knowing that how strong you are going into this is vital to success. And you have mentioned that over and over again, which I really appreciate too.
And I'll piggyback that. Because Oren was a forceps delivery, I developed a fever. I was pushing for 2.5 hours because he was stuck. So they took my temperature literally the second he was born. And because he was a forceps delivery, like they said, Dad, cut the cord. He's got to go over here. We got to check him out. And I was like, okay. And I developed a fever, and they're like, you might have COVID. Everyone left the room except the doctors with the babies, and they're like, full get up gear. And I was like, I've been pushing for 2.5 hours. Like, I don't think I've got COVID. You've been testing me every single, I just developed it after my body went through intense stress.
Yeah.
And my midwives, they just said, you know what, give her a moment. Like, she just had a birth. Give her a moment. Let her be. And I was like, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And they're like, we're going to get you out of here soon. And then another OB took over, like, no, you need full antibiotics. You need all this, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I just want to go home with my baby.
Yeah.
And I had to stay there for 24 hours, which, you know what, I was thankful that I did. But again, with mindset, so I had to be induced with Oren. And so he was already 5 days overdue. And because my husband's a caterer, we got into his very busy season with weddings and stuff like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, if I go into labor and he's in the wedding, we had it planned with his team that he could bolt out of there But at the same time, I'm like, I don't want him in the middle of a wedding service. And I'm like, I'm in labor, get over it
Yeah.
and drive
Yeah.
or wherever he is.
Yeah.
So my midwives talked about inducing me. So they did end up inducing me. And it was 2 days of hell being induced. Um,
Mhm.
oh, it was awful. They put this like sandpaper thing. It's like Cervidil or something like that. It was awful. And I was having contractions every 5 minutes for the first day. And then the second day, because I wasn't dilating at all, the second day, I was contracting every minute, but no progression, like nothing. And
Mhm.
that's when I really delved into my mindset because I was like, did I do the right thing? Inducing him, maybe he could have come like even later. But then again, they talk about if it's an IVF baby, there's higher risks. I'm like, I don't understand why, but higher risks, he needs to come out. He can't be more than a week late. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm already pressing it. So Oren was born on a Friday night, and the Saturday morning at noon, like my husband sent his team to like go prep for like set up for the wedding. And he's like, I'm going to be about an hour late. He's like, I got to stay with my wife till at least noon.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. But it was very much one of those things where I stayed very strong in my mindset. Like, I believe in saying the universe or God or spirit. I use them interchangeably, but I use universe more. Um, I let go of my birthing plan and I was like, I know that I'm being divinely guided. I know I'm being divinely protected right now. So I need to just know that I'm strong and I'm going to get through this. We're going to get through this, but I need to use my mind. I need to very much advocate for myself. When it came to the C-section time, I was like, no, I know I'm protected. And I remember I had my first OB appointment after Oren was born. She did a checkup on me. And she's like, I have to tell you something. She's like, how are you mentally? I'm like, I'm good. And she's like, have you processed your birth? I'm like, no, I don't need to. And she's like, okay. And she's like, that was the scariest birth I've ever seen. And I was like,
Wow.
I'm like, don't tell me that. I'm like, I didn't process this. And she's like, it's okay. She's like, he's here. He's healthy. Nothing was wrong with him. And I was like, okay. Okay. And she's like, I reread your notes. And she's like, I instantly like relived that moment. She's like, that was a really scary birth. I'm glad that I wasn't like, I was so focused he was coming out and it was okay. He was okay. That's all I focused on. And she said, have you ever Googled like forceps deliveries? And I said, no. She's like, don't. And she's like, no. I'm like, okay, I won't. I won't. So any listeners, don't Google it.
Oh my gosh. Wow, that's some like pretty bold news to throw onto a newly postpartum mom.
Yeah. So
You would think.
I was thankful she said that because it allowed me to go back again and just think of my mindset and how I was like so focused and having Bobby, my husband, in my ear saying to me, like, the universe is protecting us, it's guiding us, we're okay. Oren's gonna come out. Because we had Oren's name picked out long before we were actually pregnant with him.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just it. I was like, okay, I'm here, we're okay. Yeah. So
I love that.
yeah, it's just I honestly truly believe, especially after studying the universal laws and seeing how it applies to every area of your life. That was one of the things, and like really understanding mindset and where, the duality goes of the hope and the but, like, the ego stepping in, like the negative mind just talking at you. And how easy we just tend to follow that and be like, oh, well, maybe I should stay with this doctor because what if I'm on a wait list for another year or another year and a half if you're doing funding or things like that. But timing will always work out. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that's hard for some people to hear, but it will always work out when you make the decision and you listen to your gut and you really like just stay focused and don't worry about the outside noise of like it could potentially be another year. It could potentially, because I know lots of like women that are in their 30s automatically are deemed like if you don't have a child by the time you're this, like, oh, your egg quality is diminishing and all, and that's like society like just coming at you. And then even fertility doctors, like they start to say at a certain age, like in the medical world you're not geriatric, but in the fertility world all of a sudden you hit a certain age and you're now geriatric and you're like, I'm
Yeah.
old. I'm not
Yes.
old at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that needs to be revised.
Very much, because
Yeah.
people do want to have children later in life now. And I think that's a noble thing. Like, if you want to feel like you've lived a bit of your life before you had children, go for it. Or maybe some people didn't find their right partner, like, until later in life, because for whatever reasons. And I don't think that, it's fair to be deemed as something, because that really does play in the back of your mindset, or you start to think like, well, no, I got to go with this clinic because I'm this age. And like, if you let go of all of that, you will find the right clinic, or you will find that things do line up. So yeah,
We all have that like deep intuition piece that we give away so easily. And I keep calling it like the feeling, but like you just know. I didn't even mention that um, because we switched to the other fertility clinic, we were still on the wait list for the first one. And we got a package in the mail like 6 or 7 months prior to moving through IVF with our like present fertility clinic. And it basically was like, okay, it's your turn. Like the package was like, okay, it's your turn. We are ready for you. But again, the feeling was like, no, like this isn't right. And I don't even know, like, if that was who knows what would have happened? Maybe it would have worked, maybe it wouldn't have. But again, that feeling was like, we switched for a reason. We don't need to go through this 6 months earlier than potentially what we're going to. If we all just like double down on our intuition and like got really strong in our mind, I feel like we would have an easier time navigating this, because it's always just like, what's my next best move? Like, that is the only next move that I need. I don't need to know what's 6 months or 8 months down the road. Like, what is my next best move now? And I think you wrap that up beautifully with just like trusting where you are. And trusting in that next move, and trusting in you. You are your best authority at the end of the day. You only have one body, you only have one heart. And I think we forget, because it's just such a crazy world out there. Yeah.
And I think we're taught, like, this is no way placing judgment on any doctor, any person in any type of profession. But I feel like we are, like, always told, like, these people have studied in their field, so you listen to them, they know everything. But at the end of the day, we are all human. And, you think about people that go through serious medical conditions, and they go get a second opinion, and they go do other things. And, it's not always the first opinion that works. It's not, every single person, what resonated with them when they were in medical school didn't always, like, that's why people are specialized in their field, because they're like, oh, like, I really believe in a more holistic approach. No, I believe science backs up everything. So, you know what I mean? And I think that's why it's amazing. And I know that after Grady was born, was it a lip tie or a tongue tie?
Yeah, he came out with like a full gamut colic. It took him months to just like really transition to the world, but he had a tongue and lip tie diagnosed early. And I took him to our first dentist, who was recommended to me. And he specializes in, air quotes, tongue and lip ties. And I walked Grady in, and I just had like the worst feeling already. And he basically was like, okay, this is what it is. This is what that. And then he looked at Grady. He looked in Grady's mouth, and then he brought out this like doll, and he showed me what he would do to Grady on this doll. And he's like, we can do that right now. And I was like, whoa, no, this is my first stop in looking for a tongue and lip tie specialist. And, you're moving very quickly. And this doesn't feel right. So we walked out, and then I started like messaging some of the people that I really trust. And we decided on a pediatric tongue and lip tie specialist based out of Guelph. And the moment that we stepped in, it was like all, encompassing, welcoming. She brought us back to this couch where a lactation consultant spoke with us first. And then a chiropractor was on site, because tongue and lip ties are not just in the mouth. It's like a full body release, a full body tightening and releasing. So then there was a lactation consultant. We spoke with her. There was a pediatric chiropractor, spoke with her. And then we spoke with the dentist, and she just like picked Grady up in her arms and like was rocking him and just like loving all over him. And in that, she's like, he definitely, has a tongue and lip tie that needs to be addressed. She's like, but today we're not going to do anything because he needs to still be seeking like weekly chiropractic appointments because his fascia is so tight. So within that first appointment, she did this like laser fascial release on his jaw and tongue, inside and outside of his mouth and neck. And she's like, we'll see you in 6 weeks. And she sent us home. And that to me was just like, and then she gave us, what to do, like keep going to the chiropractor, keep doing these stretches and whatever. And then 6 weeks later, we went back, and again, she did the like laser fascial thing, and he had his tongue and lip tie release, and we got to like relax on the couch after. And the lactation consultant was there again, and she made sure that he was nursing correctly, and everything was just like, I was so taken care of. Me as a mom, I was taken care of. Grady as the baby was taken care of. And it just it was a night and day difference between the very first one that we walked into and that one. Again, like that feeling, the first one, I was like, okay, no, there has to be something better. Like, and I was just so grateful that he had such a good experience, and I did too at the second one.
And I think, thank you for sharing that, because I think it's so important, because I know, especially as a first time mom, or even, my kids, like my twins and Oren literally have 5.5 years difference. So, oh my gosh, the world changes so much.
Yes.
Just even all the baby gear that changed. I was like, I so wish I had this with my twins.
Yes.
But I think it's so important to just keep advocating for yourself. And I love that you shared that. And I'm so appreciative that you came on today. Because I think we're so concerned for our babies when they come out, and we, trusted people tell us like, we recommend this doctor, or we recommend this pediatrician, or we recommend whatever. And you go there, and, sometimes you're just so worried about how, baby's nursing or all these things. You're like, okay, yes, just do it. So I love how you touch on, like, you just felt like this is not right. And I think it's so important being in tune with your intuition, during your IVF journey, and, through your pregnancy, and even after that, you are your advocate. You are like your mind and your body. Like, people don't believe me when I say this, but your DNA is perfect. Like, inside, we are all connected in such a beautiful way, but we're bogged down with like society and negativity and all these things on us that we don't always trust our intuition. And, we're told like, well, trust this person. And you're like, okay, sure. So I love that you shared your advocacy, that you just, you said like, we are our own best medicine. We are our own best people. Like, we have to go with what feels right, because that really will change your journey as well. Like you said, you don't know what it would be like if you ultimately went with your first fertility clinic where, things could have possibly started 6 months earlier, but who knows where you would have been. It's just that trusting that feeling and knowing that, like, you know what, even if it's 6 months longer, maybe it actually, if you went with your first fertility clinic, it could have been far longer. Who knows?
Yes.
And, all the medical things that I read, like, oh my gosh, sometimes I remind myself, stop.
I know, like less reading today.
It's so fascinating. So at nighttime, I try and read like medical journals, just because I find it fascinating how every doctor in the fertility world has such a different idea of what works and what doesn't. And, when we went to our new fertility clinic, And as soon as I saw my doctor right away, I'm very much a person, especially at that point, like I was like, just tell me what to do, but like, I don't want the fluff. Just give me like the raw, real end of this stuff. And he was that doctor. And I know other doctors in that clinic that are so like sweet and caring, and they give you that fluff and like, oh, it's okay. We're gonna, and I'm like, no, I've done this
Yes.
before. Just give me the raw red, like just
Yeah.
tell me it all, like just now.
Yeah.
And he was that doctor for me, and I very much appreciate it. Like there was no sugarcoating anything. He was like this, and well, I'm like, oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
But as soon as we went to that clinic, yeah, it was, depending on traffic, sometimes it was a 3-hour drive for us. But I felt so good in that clinic, and I loved the nurses in my first fertility clinic. They are what made the experience. I never felt like I bonded with either one of the doctors in my first clinic. But again, I was that mindset. I was like, just tell me what I have to do and I'll do it. And, my second time around, I was like, no, I'm not that same little naive girl. Like I've done this before and I'm not going to do the same things I did last time. So here we are. And it was just a totally different environment. And it was worth it for like, for just following what felt right for me. And, I've had some people ask me because I did have like I did back-to-back embryo transfers, and some people like, how could you do that? And again, it was very much a mindset thing. I took my space. I did allow myself to grieve. I did allow myself. And, years later, now that Oren's 2, I spent a good year blessing and releasing both of my fertility journeys, and just like looking at the good, the bad, the ugly, and all of it, and letting it go. But in those moments, I did take time to grieve, but I just knew mentally what felt right for me to allow me to go forward. And some people need time off, and I think that's okay too. You have to do what's right for you, because my medical protocol could have been very different than yours. And and that's okay, because you're on more or less medication. Like I went through menopause as well, but mine started with a nasal spray.
Yeah.
They don't,
Yeah.
the nasal spray doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, the fertility world is constantly advancing as well. So I think
Yeah.
it's just important that never follow someone else's journey. And that's why I want to have these open, candid conversations with women that have had success, to show that, what I know, some people, personally for me, after I had my twins, some of people in my close circle and people not necessarily in my close circle started talking about, oh, they went to a different fertility clinic in the same city and they got pregnant in the first try. And I was like, why was I recommended to this fertility clinic? And I remember going in that space for a little bit, and I thought, no, I have my babies. I'm not even going to go there. I don't even want to talk about, like, I don't need, it's not serving my purpose to think like, why was I given the wrong clinic, or was I done this, or blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, again, it's just truly advocating for yourself and not comparing anyone's journey. Because
And sorry, in saying that too, it's like it's challenging, but we can feel happy for women and families that are growing and having babies. Like when you're in it, you're so bogged down. Like you're full of hormones, you're full of medication, you're full of calendar dates with the fertility clinic, and like your friend is having a baby shower, your cousin is having a baby, your neighbors having a baby. Like it just is. There's a moment too where it's like there were a couple baby showers that I didn't go to, that I wasn't in a good headspace for. But then I was like, how dare I? Like I should be celebrating, and I'm so happy for them and being around that energy. And like this is important too, like we can be happy while for other people while we are going through like the mud through for us.
Mhm.
And you touched on that too. And I think that part is so important, because I know so many women that are like, I'm just so sad all the time. And you are allowed to feel sad, believe me. Like feel all the things that you want to feel, but you can't stay there.
Mhm.
That is not the place where your baby comes to you. You are allowed to feel multiple things at multiple times. happy, sad, anger, whatever, jealousy. Like, we're women, of course, are just like very emotional beings too. And we just need to remember that we can hold containers to also celebrate babies coming into this world as well.
Yeah. I definitely did that. I went to a lot of baby showers.
Yeah.
And, like people would say to me like, oh, like you and your husband have been married for a couple of years, like, and you guys already have 3 stepkids. Like, when are you guys going to have your own, or do you want to have your own? And I remember like in that moment, I would just say, oh, well, when the timing's right, because I wasn't going to go into the whole spiel. Well, we're actually in a fertility clinic and we've had this happen. But I really believed that I wanted to hold space for the people, because I kept saying, when I get to have my babies, and I know some people are, depending on where they are in their fertility journey, it is such a triggering point to talk about baby showers, to talk about things like that. But I encourage you to really hold space, because and really start telling yourself, like, I'm going to be here and celebrate this person, because you know what, if I choose to have a baby shower, I want them to be at mine too. Or I just want people to love on me when I tell them that I'm pregnant, and I know it's really hard for some people to hear, but I really encourage people to hold that space for yourself. Because that got me through some really, really tough days when I was like, is this even going to happen? Is this even going to work? And I would have days where I would just cry, and I'd be like, why? Oh, we went to IKEA and like every second person is pregnant in IKEA.
Yes. Yes. Been there.
Yeah. And you're just like, why me? Why me? And I remember just telling myself, no, someday I get to have my baby. And when I finally made the decision, I was like, no, I'm going to have twins. I was like, I get to hold my babies. I get to hold my babies. Like, this is, I'm going to be here for this, this moment, because I want to be celebrated like this too. And I believe in energy. I believe in vibrations and frequencies, and I really wanted to stay on that place. And so
an excellent book that your listeners may love, that I really loved, it's a very easy read, it's just stories, is Spirit Babies by Walter McCutcheon. You probably touch on this in different podcast episodes, but that book truly helped me. It's just one man talking about mediumship through spirit babies, and your baby is attached to you long before you know them. They are just waiting in the wings for the right time. So there's also that hope. Like, you can talk to them, you can reach out to them, you can, like, when you buy that baby onesie, like, whisper to them, like, I can't wait to see you wear this, like, I am so ready for you. Like, every spare moment I was like, I'm so ready for you, I can't wait for you, I'm just gonna squeeze those cute cheeks, like, there is an amalgamation of like, it's very sciencey and also very spiritual, and I am a huge component that you need both, and they need to just like meld together. Like, you need to be on the supplements, you need to see a naturopath, you need to take care of your vessel, your spiritual vessel, and you need to be on the medication, and you need to stimulate your body, and you need your like white coat doctor in the room with you. Like, you need both. It's just so important.
Well, thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you so much for being here today. And I know the listeners are going to take so much away from this conversation, because it's a beautiful story of hope. It's a beautiful story of advocacy. It's a beautiful story of, it doesn't have to be easy, but you were one of the ones that got pregnant on the first try, which I think some people need to know too, because I wasn't that person, but you didn't go without having some blips or some hiccups, as you called it. And I don't want to encourage my listeners to think that, there has to be blips, but just know that when you hold the right mindset, really that you can, the right things will happen at the right time. And I love that you say, like, talk to your babies, talk to them, because that's something that I did. I walked into our nursery and, we again had our names picked out for our babies, and I would talk to them, and I started buying them clothes. I had like a whole baby registry online before I was even pregnant, because I was like, I need to get in this mindset. Like, my babies are coming to me, and they did. So yeah, I think thank you so much for sharing your story. I know some women find it too vulnerable to share. So this is why it's amazing that when women can openly talk about their birth story, they can openly talk about their fertility journey. Because that's the whole point, is I want to give people hope in a dark place. Because I feel like a lot of places like social media chat rooms and things like that are still very like, it's not going to work on the first time, or if you get pregnant, you're going to get kicked out, all of these different things. And I just thank you so much for being here with me today. And I know our listeners are just going to be like, thank you for giving me hope, and thank you for reminding me that I can advocate for myself, and based off of feeling this is going to be a great place. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. And is there any last things that you want to share with our listeners before we end our call?
No, I think we covered a lot today. Just if they listen to this and they feel like reaching out or sharing their story, I love connecting with moms, soon-to-be moms, first-time moms, IVF moms, to chat with them, just like mom to mom, woman to woman. So you can find me on Instagram for that, joc.hinz, joce.hinz. Just like, send me a little wave emoji or something. I'd love to connect with you on that. And thanks, Jess, for creating this container. I think it's really, really important. And the more we talk about it, the less stigma there is around it. So again, super important.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So listeners, check the podcast notes and you will see the link to Jocelyn's social media, her Instagram. So if you feel called to reach out to her, like she said, please do. She loves to connect. And everyone, thank you for being here. I hope you have the most amazing day and week, and I'll see you in next week's episode.
If you found this helpful or know anyone that needs to hear this, please share. And don't forget to leave a review and subscribe. In love and gratitude, Jessica.